Early in the 20th century, as Little Rock was extending its city limits westward past the state capital, and communities in those areas were searching for worship opportunities closer to their homes, the seeds of Pulaski Heights Methodist Church were planted just off the trolley line in Hillcrest. Beginning by meeting on Sunday afternoons in the existing Episcopal church nearby, the neighborhood Methodist women established a Sunday school for their children, and soon convinced their husbands that money needed to be raised to build a local church for the denomination. And as they say, the rest is history, our history.
The church was such a part of our life, and I think part of it was because it was in the community, in the neighborhood, and there was just this feeling that you weren't really leaving home in a way, because you just walked a few blocks and then you were surrounded by another loving family that was just bigger.
After the wedding, we went to the reception. It was held at my parents' home about a block away. And it was a very warm September day. Nothing was air conditioned at that time. When we came back after the reception to take pictures, we found out that the candles were still lit and they were beginning to melt and lean in different directions. And maybe one of them had fallen out. I'm not sure about that.
Kenneth Shamblin came in at that time, and he was a church builder. He was known for that. He was young, he was probably 30, but he had been successful in building churches, so he started collecting money and pushing for drives, and this was right at the end of the war, and people were coming back home, and money was becoming a bit more plentiful. They were raising money, and they raised it. In the meantime, they didn't want to try and keep up the old building, so we rented the Prospect Theater.
Well, I don't know what, it was just a very exciting time for us to, it's a joyous occasion. And I participated in the walk from the old church to here on Christmas Day, 1950.
Well, it had been the culmination of a long period of time getting a building built. We all were wanting to do that. We'd gone through a period of several ministers working on doing that, and it was a long, arduous task. It wasn't something that was done in a short period of time.
Christmas Eve, we met up there at the church, and it happened to be on a Sunday, and we sang, so and then we came down here midway through the service and marched down and got out here in front of this church and walked in and had our first service.
And I was in the march coming from the old church to the new, and that was just, I guess that's probably the day I realized I really, really wanted to make my own decisions.
Advanced units are
in 1957, when Little Rock was in chaos, this church opened its doors to all. People here began the Woodlawn Therapeutic Children's Center, now part of Camp Aldersgate.
The blacks might try to enter the white churches, and poor Dr. Shamblin said he worked hard on them from passing any rules and regulations about accepting a black person into the sanctuary. And Bernard Kelso was one of the ushers at that time, and he said, if they tell me that I can't let anybody into this church that wants to come, I resign right now. I will not refuse anybody that wants to come into this church, black or white.
It was started in '51 by Alton Rainey in memory of his mother and father. The trust document was not dated until 1957. Knowing Alton Rainey at the time, he probably just funded it out of his pocket each year and kept going. He was very active at Pulaski Heights Methodist, very active at Hendricks, was chosen to be on a lot of boards, national boards, and so he knew a lot of the speakers that he and the minister, Kenneth Shamblin, they chose to invite.
I'll never forget when we moved to Little Rock in 1961. And we lived a long ways from Pulaski Heights Methodist, so we were visiting churches every Sunday, and we couldn't find a church we liked. Finally came up here to visit one Sunday, and I wasn't sure we were going to like this church because everybody was crying that Sunday. Everybody was. And we finally figured it out. It was the last sermon by a minister that had been here for so long, Kenneth Shamlin. So we decided, well, this might be a nice venture to join this church and be here with the new minister when he showed up the next Sunday. And I'm so glad we did.
Christian education was vitally important here. So that foundation was really laid by Mrs. Story. She was very, very strong in our development of Christian education. Pulaski Heights was a learning church and always has been.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Television ministry was formed in 1965. James Argue was the preacher at that time. He and 30 other members of the church gave $1,000 apiece for seed money for our first service was March 1966. We cover the majority of the state. Viewership is about 8,000. We get a lot of people when we ask them why they came to our church. The first thing they say is, we saw you on TV. Liked what we saw.
Pulaski Heights United Methodist Church held its very first sunrise service in 1989. But the idea was born in the fall of 1988. The church staff had a small retreat and all of the staff was there. We had an idea that we wanted to do something that the church could involve the community with. At that time, the new Riverfront Park was just being completed in the amphitheater, and it turned out that we were the very first service that was there.
I can't even remember the name of it, but they did some musical in the Great Hall, and I guess I was too young to really understand it, but hearing about that a couple days ago, my mother told me that my eyes were on that stage and that they would not move. I can somewhat remember it being too small to reach the floor or even having to stand up to look and see, but I can remember being there and seeing the movement of the people on the stage.
I remember one time Bob and Georgia Sells were the adults that were the directors for the youth play that summer, and I forget the name of the play. I wish I could remember it, but some of the characters in the play were police officers, and Bob arranged with the Little Rock Police Department to get real Little Rock police officer uniforms. So one night, several hours before play practice starts, we're dressed up in our police uniforms, and we go rushing out the church door, out on the back parking lot, and we're screaming, "Stop, stop, or I'll shoot!" And all the lights in the neighboring houses start turning on one by one. In a few minutes, the Little Rock police show up, wondering what's happening.
It all began when I was around 6 or 7 with Miss Julie as my choir teacher. We sang all these songs in services, and I didn't know what they meant, but I knew she wanted me to sing them for her. I felt really enlightened to know that there are older people who not everyone majored in music, but they still wanted to continue learning music, going through the whole process of it, even when they had jobs and other things.
The Little Rock City Church League.
In the future.
If you're too old to change, then you're too old. So that's been my motto.
The fellowship and caring for each other.
I'm spiritual to a degree.
I'm so hopeful.
Like the grace of God.
The artistic part of the church and the worship
was my love.
Try to meet the needs and to communicate the good news with people in the future.
It takes the people
Become
out of the
more
pew,
involved.
trains them, and they go out to minister.
But someone did
dedicated
it for me
church.
years ago.
Good shepherd.
This church is not static, it is a work in progress.
That's what life is all about, is Jesus Christ. And I think that has to be the church's message, because we are the body of Christ in this church.
The church has been a part of my life forever. My parents were very active here. I was married here. My children were all baptized here. They're all members of the church and their spouses. And my grandchildren are now going to Sunday school here, and it's just a part of my life, very meaningful. The friends that are here I have had forever, and my parents' generation, there are not as many of them left, but I've known them forever. It's pretty special.
There's much more to our church's remarkable journey, which all started right down the road 100 years ago this month. With this strong foundation, just think what is possible in the future.